Welcome again. In this video, we're going to take a look at a preview of chapters 1 through 5. And I know that's a lot of chapters, but they are different kind of chapters than the normal assignments. Only one of them is a regular chapter with vocabulary, and only one is a regular chapter with some work assignment for you to do. So we'll go through that, and most of our previews will be only for 1 or 2 chapters. So I think it will be a pretty good bite-sized thing. Let me start out by mentioning the text and ask you to keep that handy. The process, I think, should be that when you look at the video, you have your text in hand so that we can talk about some of the things that Mounts is covering and that we need to cover, and emphasize things we need to learn. We'll try to point out things we need to memorize, and what we don't say memorize, then just read it and grasp it and move on. So we'll talk about those things as we go through. Let me begin by pointing out the importance of reading the beginning pages of the book. They're Roman numerals as numbers, but there's some important information in there. The preface, abbreviations, that's always helpful. Then he talks about the professor. It's a little gadget that he uses throughout the book that points out some extra things, and I think you'll find it helpful. His rationale statement, that really does help you get a grip on where he is coming from and what his methodology of teaching is. It's a very inductive method, so it does minimize memorization and kind of helps you to build on things as you go over them again and again. So anyway, if you'll read that rationale statement, I think it would be helpful to you. I mentioned Technia.com already. I want to mention it again. That is such a valuable website, and there are many things on there that are free, and then some other things that do cost. He tries to keep the cost low, and I think he and some other folks who work with him are really doing a great job on that. So I really recommend that you get to know the Technia.com. There are some CDs and other things that can help you. One of the things I would mention especially is on the page that is facing chapter 1. It would be 22 in Roman numerals, XX2I. And anyway, it's called Flashworks. This is something that is free. It is a flashcard system that Dr. Mounts has designed that is keyed to the book, and the vocabulary in the book has a good bit of information on it. So I would encourage you to, when you go on Technia.com, take a look at that and see if it's something that you think would be useful to you. If you're able to study around your computer, I would say it would really be a good flashcard system. You may want to supplement it with something else so that you can use it at other times. All right, let's look at chapter 1 if we can. It's about the Greek language. It deals with the history, specifically talking about Koine Greek. And so just read that. That's all you need to do. It's only 1 page and about 3 lines over on the next page, so it shouldn't take but just a moment. The next chapter is extremely important, and that is chapter 2, and it's called Learning Greek. Again, it's a read-only chapter, but he gives you some information here that will help you a great deal in the learning process. Some of the things he covers here is what your goal is, and that's important. If you keep your goal in mind, it will be your motivation to keep moving. Your goal is to learn the Greek language so that you can interpret the New Testament and proclaim the gospel more efficiently and effectively. So if you keep that in mind, then that will be a motivation for you. He talks about memorization. As I've already said, he keeps that to a minimum, but there are some things you'll have to learn. And when we say you need to memorize this, then just memorize it, and that will make things go a little bit better. The exercises are in the workbook that you have, and they, I think, will help you as you grow in that process. One thing I would say to you, Dr. Mounts takes an approach that you can get all the answers, and there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, except that it is a very strong temptation to use that as a crutch, so that you simply take the answer sheet and fill in the workbook and get your grade. And the grade is not what you're after here. What you're after is learning Greek. And my feeling is that the better thing would be, at least at this point, maybe later on if you want to, but at least at this point, leave the answer sheet off and do the work yourself, and we'll try to give you feedback and work with you on that. But that of course is going to be your decision. You can get by with it, but we have the answer sheet. So understand that if yours is word for word for his, then it won't be too hard to understand that somebody's not doing what they ought to be doing. He talks about time and consistency, but I would say it's time. It's going to take time, and the more often you can do it every day, if you can do it every day, it will be great. Also, he mentions partners, using learning partners. I really encourage that. Students have affirmed that in recent semesters. So if you can find somebody that is in the class going along with you, either who's in your location or somebody you can connect with on Skype or something like that, it would really be helpful. I remember that from my own experience, and it was very helpful to me. Chapter 3 is a very, very important chapter. There are two things that are key here. The one that is most important and the one that is your immediate priority is to learn the alphabet. You want to learn to recognize it, you want to learn to write it, and you want to learn to pronounce it. All of those things are important. As you read through this chapter, he'll talk about the alphabet, but on pages 8 and 9, you see the alphabet as it's listed in several columns. You don't have to learn the uppercase letters, but you do need to learn the lowercase letters, and you need to learn how to pronounce them and how to write them. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit later in an exercise, but it is those things are very, very important. Let me mention one other thing as we go along. I would really encourage you to make for yourself a workbook, or really a notebook, where you can copy things out of the textbook and keep them in that notebook. This would be one of them. If you do what's on pages 8 and 9, if you cut and paste it and make it just one, so it'll be on one page, and keep that in something like a 3-ring binder, then you can use that as you're doing your exercises. It will help you, and you learn from that process. That's inductive learning, that's repeating, and so it's something that will help you a great deal. And we'll refer to that notebook as we go through. I'll tell you, this is something that you need in your notebook. On page 10, there are a couple of things that are important. Spend a little time on this. One is in section 3.4, and that's the breathing marks. There are two of them, smooth and rough. The smooth really has no effect on the pronunciation. The rough does. It adds an H, an English H sound before that. These breathing marks will appear on all words that begin with a vowel, either the smooth or the rough. So read carefully what he says, and we'll talk about that some more in our first class. Diphthongs is another thing. You're probably familiar with those from English, but you just want to learn what they are. Put them on a little card and put them in your notebook. Now I want you to notice on page 11 the summary. These are important, it seems to me. What you can do with those is, when you get to that point, you've already worked through the lesson, look at those, read those statements. If they are clear to you, fine, move on. If they are not clear to you, use them as a trigger to send you back to the chapter, to look again at what is being spoken here, so that you can understand the material thoroughly. Then the next section there is advanced information. This is something that is what we call in New Orleans little lagniappe. It is something extra. I encourage you, if you're highly motivated, to spend some time on it and learn these things. If you're not that motivated for this right now, then what I would encourage you to do is simply read through it. You won't have any test questions or anything that come out of that. That's just extra stuff. All right, chapter 4 is introduces another thing that I think is very helpful, and that is an exegetical insight. This one's written by his dad, Robert Mounts, but these throughout the text are going to be good. Now, you're not going to agree with everything. You probably don't agree with your wife or husband in everything they say, so that's kind of normal. But anyway, I would encourage you to read it because I think you'll find it helpful. Then he gives us an overview which points ahead in the chapter to tell you what he's going to do. This chapter is about Greek punctuation. Punctuation is similar in some ways to English, except it's a lot simpler. There are 4 punctuation marks. One is a comma, functions the same way an English comma does. Another is a period, functions the same way an English period does. The third is the semicolon, and it kind of is a mix between the function of a semicolon and a colon in English. It's written as a raised dot, kind of parallel to the top of the letter that it follows. And then what looks like a semicolon with the raised dot and a comma under it, that is the Greek question mark. So just learn these and be sure to note that, especially that question mark, because it makes a difference. Read about diacritical remarks and accents. We'll talk about accents more. There are 4 accents in Greek, and we'll talk about those more. And then the next section, 4.3, talks about dividing the words into syllables. And so I want you to pay much attention to that. We'll be doing an exercise later on about that. And then look at the summary and then the vocabulary. That's going to be a big thing. Now, there's a lot of vocabulary here, but these words are relatively familiar, about as familiar as Greek words could be to us at this point. So you will recognize those. Let me run through this. I want to pronounce these. We'll work on these again, probably in the class time, in the first class meeting if we have the time. But anyway, if you'll listen and then repeat these words after I do. The first word is angelos, means angel. And then amen, that's amen. That's pronounced roughly the same in Hebrew, Greek, and English. And then anthropos is man. Apostolos is apostle. You'll recognize these words. Galileia, that's Galilee. That's easy to follow, isn't it? And then you have graphe, which is the word that has to do with writing. Doxa, doxology is the word that comes from that, and it means glory or majesty or fame. And then ego is, we get our word ego from that. It's the first personal pronoun, I. And then eschatos, you'll recognize eschatology there. It means last. And then zoe, our word zoology comes from that, and it means life. There are 2 words for life. We'll meet the other one later. Theos, you will recognize as the word for God. And then kai, that's one of the most frequently used words. Over 9,000 times it's used in the Greek New Testament, and it means and. It's the conjunction and. It's a little bit more flexible than our conjunction, but you'll learn some of those nuances later. Cardia, you will recognize having to do with the heart, and then cosmos, having to do with the cosmos. That's pretty straightforward. And then logos is pretty familiar. I think all of us recognize that word, which means word. And then pneuma